It's been 2.5 years since the pandemic began, and Disney World is virtually unrecognizable in a lot of ways. And if we take a look at these updates, you might be surprised how the changes continue to severely impact trips to the most magical place on Earth. Hey everybody, it's AJ for Disney Food Blog. Year after year, we see Disney World undergo major park changes, but no park changes have been quite as drastic as what 2020 served up during and after the pandemic. Today, we're taking a deeper dive into how all future Disney World trips have been permanently altered after those historic closures and how you can still pull off a successful trip regardless. We're going to break this video down into two parts. Things that were definitely changed by the pandemic and are still changed today, and things Disney kind of blames the pandemic for, but that they were kind of wanting to do anyways, closures or not. And the pandemic gave them an excuse to do it. So quick disclaimer, there are several changes made post-2020 closures that we're not going to get in depth with today because that'd mean talking your ear off about money. And yeah, money is going to be a key subject for many of these points, but if you really want an in-depth look at how the Walt Disney Company started pulling themselves out of the gutter when 2020 cost them millions of dollars, you can check out our Can Disney Keep Raising Its Prices video for a clearer timeline and our thoughts on the matter. Okay, let's get into it. We're going to start with these things that were forced by the pandemic and that we're still dealing with. Disney World had to make some tough decisions in order to keep the parks running smoothly during a time when things were everything but smooth. And to this very day, the Disney Company, as well as Disney's guests and cast members, are still juggling the impact that these forced decisions have created. We're going to start with the layoffs. Disney is still struggling to hire back enough people to keep up with current park demand after having to furlough and let go thousands of cast members. So let's review the details here and show you how this doesn't just impact park efficiency for the cast members, but continues to impact your visits too. At the beginning of the pandemic closures, Disney didn't think they'd have to stay closed for terribly long. They initially mentioned 2 weeks tops, and that's what we were all thinking, right? Remember March 2020? But obviously, 2 weeks turned into nearly 4 months of closures for Disney World. And in the case of Disneyland, the park stayed closed for over a year. When Disney realized they'd need to keep their gates locked for the time being, a wave of furloughs swept across their family of cast members. Originally, these furloughs were supposed to be temporary, but as the closures continued, furloughs started switching over into full-on layoffs. And in September of 2020, 28,000 cast members were let go from the Disney Company. Not too long after the first wave of layoffs, another 13,000 cast members were relieved of their jobs as well. In 2021, as park capacity started to increase, more experiences started to reopen and health restrictions were eased. And the Disney Company began reaching out to former cast members to offer them positions in the company again. During the Q1 earnings call at the beginning of the year, Disney CEO Bob Chapek stated that 85% of the cast members pretty much say yes immediately when they ask them back. And when they started bringing back the Disney College program, as well as slowly integrating the international program to help fill the empty spaces around World Showcase and Epcot, that helped relieve some of the employment shortages as well. But 33,000 cast members being let go from the company was a huge dent, and Disney's still struggling to fill in this hole that was left by those layoffs. Because even with 85% of cast members returning to their roles, that still means 15% who were offered their jobs and had already moved on. As Disney continues to search out more new cast members, several parts of Disney World are still being impacted by the lingering loss, like the many perks and experiences I'm going to talk about in more detail later on. The truth is, these layoffs set off a chain reaction that Disney hasn't yet recovered from and are a thread we're going to keep coming back to. Now, of course, another big change that was forced by the pandemic is how we get into the parks. If you've been to the parks since they've reopened, or you've at least been keeping up with our channel post-2020 closures, then you've heard about the Park Pass reservation system. Getting a Park Pass reservation is the second step you have to take after you purchase your theme park tickets. Basically, what this does is save your spot in the park. Originally, Disney put this system in place to help control the crowds. You remember when we were talking about capacity, right? Well, since the parks initially reopened with a very low capacity cutoff due to the pandemic and distancing recommendations, this is how they controlled it, basically. But this reservation system has proven to be exponentially more useful to the company as attendance rises. Now, the reservation system gives Disney an in-depth look at guest demand to visit the theme parks and reams of data about which parks are most popular and when those parks are most popular, where guests want to go and how long they stay there, which helps Disney determine how many cast members will need to be working and what their surge prices for hotel rooms, tickets, and Genie Plus add-ons should be set to, because the higher the attendance and the higher demand, the higher those prices are going to spike. The Park Pass reservation system also allows Disney to monitor the types of guests who enter the park, because the park passes are split into separate buckets, with a certain number of slots allotted for annual pass holders, hotel guests, and regular ticket holders. So Disney can control for an optimal mix, which usually happens to be in favor of hotel guests and regular ticket holders because Disney deems them to be more profitable for the parks than annual pass holders. Again, if you want to know more about that, head over to our Can Disney World Keep Raising Prices video. I go into it in detail over there. Now, this has been a source of major controversy when it comes to the annual passes. We'll talk about annual passes a bit more later on, but we really go in depth with all the pass holder scandals on our Truth About Annual Passes video, so check that out too when you get the chance. So are Park Pass reservations here for good now? Well, based on Disney's earnings calls, where the Park Pass system is touted as a critical lever, quote unquote, that Disney has to control park capacity and guest demographic makeup, yes. And that means even if you have a park ticket purchased, but you don't have a Park Pass reservation for the day of your visit, you still won't get into the park. And that's a real big problem, since theme park tickets can't be refunded. But making a Park Pass reservation isn't hard, and it's not going to cost you anything extra on top of what you're already paying for those park tickets. It does, however, take away the spontaneity that the parks used to have. Instead of deciding on a park out of the blue each day of your visit, you must have all your park plans already locked in place before your vacation begins, basically. Can you get a last-minute Park Pass? Sometimes. Should you risk it? Probably not. Even with Park Pass attendance way higher than it used to be, Park Pass reservations do tend to book up, especially in Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios around those peak season times, which is why it's super important for you to buy tickets and make Park Pass reservations sooner rather than later. Before you buy a park ticket, you can check on Disney's reservation calendar first to make sure the days you're wanting to visit certain parks are still available for booking. Turns out Park Pass reservations have impacted more than just your first Disney park of your day. They've also impacted the way you visit your second one of the day, too. Moving on to that next big change forced by the pandemic, those additional park hopping rules. So not everyone wants to stick to one particular Disney park each day. Some want the freedom to jump around from park to park, especially if they've only got so much time to experience all the parks on their vacation. So if they're on a weekend getaway, or if they plan on checking out other offerings in the Orlando area during their trip, then park hoppers can be a nice little tool to add onto your standard park ticket. For about an extra $65 to $85 per ticket on top of your standard ticket price, you'll have the ability to jump to multiple parks in a single day. So you could be riding a Banshee in Disney's Animal Kingdom in the morning, and by afternoon you could be dining in space in Epcot. The world is your oyster. But much like the freedom to choose what park you want to go to the day of your visit has been stripped away for the time being, the freedom to choose what time you want to start your park hopping frenzy also has restrictions that weren't there before the closures. If you purchase a park hopper, you won't be able to jump into your second park of the day until after 2 p.m. That's because Disney wants to make sure you're going to the park you made a Park Pass reservation for first, and not trying to cut corners with your park hopper privilege. And that means you can't start your morning at Disney's Hollywood Studios, ride a couple rides, and then jump on the Skyliner and be in Epcot's World Showcase by 11 a.m. You're going to have to wait till 2. Fortunately, you can still use the park hopper to technically cut corners with the Park Pass reservation system anyways. Let's say you wanted to go to Magic Kingdom on a certain day, but all the Park Pass reservations were already snatched up. If a different park, like Animal Kingdom for instance, still had Park Pass availability on that same day, you could grab a ticket, make a reservation at Animal Kingdom, and add on a park hopper while you're at it. And then once 2 p.m. rolls around, you'll be able to park hop to whatever park you want to, even the ones that were originally blocked off, meaning you could still technically go to Magic Kingdom on the day you originally wanted to go. You're just going to have to wait until 2 p.m. Unfortunately, park hopping isn't going to go back to what we once knew as normal, with no morning restrictions until Park Pass reservations are discontinued. How do we know that? Well, it's just logic. If they decided that they we're going to remove the park hopping restrictions, then you could just make a park pass for any park that has one open and hop over to the park that's full immediately. And that sort of defeats the purpose. So despite these new restrictions, park hoppers can still allow you to spend several hours between multiple parks each day. And unlike the standard single-day tickets, you don't have to decide on a park hopper add-on before your vacation. If you're still debating on whether they'll be useful to you or not, you can always add on an extra park hopper from your My Disney Experience app under the Tickets and Passes tab. Or you can have your park tickets upgraded by a cast member over at one of the ticket booths located at the front of each park or at the Disney Ticket Center in Disney Springs. Note, however, that Disney will be implementing a new system December 8th, where park hopper add-ons will start changing price depending on the day you choose it. So surge pricing is coming to park hoppers as well. All right, let's move over to hotels and how they have been changed long-term by the pandemic as well. Remember the resort-specific perks that we used to get that now are kind of shadows of their former selves due to staffing shortages? This includes in-room dining, because except for Disney's Grand Floridian Resort, you're not going to get room service pretty much anywhere. Merchandise delivery has also disappeared from the resorts for the time being. Now, this used to allow guests to have their souvenir purchases delivered back to their Disney hotels without worrying about carrying them around all day long. And the full-blown daily housekeeping services, they've now been pulled back to a much lighter service where cast members visit rooms every other day to wipe down counters and replenish supplies and empty garbage, but that's pretty much it. These are all long-term changes that we're not really seeing the end of at the moment. So here's how you get around those. Even though there's no private dining or in-room dining or room service, you can still order quick service meals and select table service to-go meals that you can just take to your room yourself if you want to. That's an option. You can also order food from delivery services like Grubhub and Postmates from a restaurant outside the Disney bubble to be delivered to your hotel. Again, these delivery services cannot take food straight up to your room. You don't want them to. That's dangerous. But you'll have to pick up your order from Bell Services once it arrives. So don't get in your jammies too quickly. Now, as far as merchandise delivery, if you plan on purchasing big figurines or one of those weighted Mickey Mouse plushies, you're going to have to backtrack to your hotel room to drop it off or put it in a locker at the front of the park if you don't want to carry it around. This is one of those instances where waiting until the end of the day to buy something could be beneficial in some cases. But I'll also talk later on about how waiting too long to buy certain items can come back to bite you. And as far as housekeeping, well, the resort will absolutely give you extra towels or refill your shampoo bottles on a day they're not going to swing by your room for some cleaning. Just use your hotel phone, make a call to housekeeping services, or use your chat function on your My Disney Experience to talk to a cast member. All right, next it's time to check out some pandemic changes that really bummed a lot of people out, us included. Remember the 2019 D23 convention? That was an exciting time where we got to learn about so many different rides and attractions and renovations coming to Disney World in the not too distant future. But with the pandemic costing the company millions and distancing recommendations keeping construction professionals out of the parks, some of these projected ideas had to be shelved indefinitely. This included the concept for the new Mary Poppins attraction for Epcot's UK Pavilion, as well as a complete retheming for the classic Spaceship Earth ride. Though we're big fans of the ride in its original form, some of the ideas they were throwing about were fresh and exciting, but I'll take original Spaceship Earth all day long. Now, Disney also fell quiet about their new Disney Vacation Club resort blueprints for Reflections, a lakeside lodge, which would have been where the old River Country water park used to be. Now, that doesn't mean these projects will never see the light of day. We saw something similar happen just recently over in Disneyland. Originally, Avengers Campus was supposed to open with an epic immersive dark ride that allowed you to board a Quinjet, fly into Wakanda, and fly alongside the Avengers. But that project didn't happen after the pandemic brought so many things to a standstill. Now, a very similar ride concept is being brought to the table again for the Avengers Campus expansion that's about to take place. But this ride concept will include more multiverse elements and feature an all-new villain, King Thanos. For the time being, however, I wouldn't get your hopes up about the Mary Poppins attraction becoming a thing anytime soon. The good news, despite the pandemic closures and major revenue losses that the Disney company endured, Disney World has still been able to open several new park attractions to pique guests' interest. There are several Epcot expansions going on, like the family coaster Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, which just opened this year, the trackless dark ride Remy's Ratatouille Adventure that opened last year, new restaurants like Space 220, La Crêperie de Paris, and the nighttime spectacular Harmonious, which is now going away in 2023, and that is kind of sad, but there'll be something new. So at least we've got all of that, right? Right. Now, there were also lots of projects that were delayed. So instead of flat-out cancellations, many Disney World projects experienced huge delays and pushbacks from their original release dates, but are still in the works and should be released in the next year or so. These include that long-awaited Tron Light Cycle Run coaster and the renovated Walt Disney World Railroad in Magic Kingdom. Tron is currently set to open in spring of 2023. We assume that the railroad will follow shortly after that, or maybe open just prior to it. I don't know. There's tracks that go through Tron for the train, so we'll see what happens. Roundup Rodeo Barbecue Restaurant in Disney's Hollywood Studios, a table service location that actually should be opening this year. We'll let you know an exact date soon. That's on its way. And several other additions for Epcot, like the Journey of Water walkthrough inspired by Moana, and Dreamers Point, which will feature a new Walt Disney statue and a new festival center, aka Communicore Hall and Plaza. All these additions are projected to open in late 2023. To keep up to date on new attraction openings so you'll know how to plan for your upcoming Disney World vacation, keep in touch with us. Our free DFB newsletter will send frequent Disney news, updates, tips, and discount notices straight to your email. I'll drop the link to sign up for our newsletter below in case you're interested in getting those updates. Now, some changes that were forced by the pandemic are some we really don't mind all that much. In fact, we vastly prefer it to the way it was before, so props. In 2019 and beyond, security screenings could be very time-consuming going into the parks, especially in the mornings when hundreds of guests were trying to arrive to Magic Kingdom in time for rope drop. Security had to check every single guest bag and stroller by hand to make sure nothing restricted was being smuggled into the parks. And you know, even though these bag checks could be very lengthy, I'm glad they were happening. I'd rather feel safe in the parks rather than uneasy the whole time. But when the touchless screening check-ins were introduced to the parks in 2020, the safety procedure became faster without risking the efficiency of the process, as far as we know. Much like you would at an airport, all you have to do for a screening check-in now is walk through a touchless screening area, where technology takes over from there. At the time, these security screenings were put in place to minimize cast member and guest contact, but now they're sticking around because, well, they're just easier. Now, Disney also tested out a face scanning system that would potentially replace the fingerprint scanning system, but that only lasted for a brief trial period and hasn't returned yet. Now, just because you're walking through a touchless screening area doesn't mean you won't still wind up needing your bag fully checked by a security cast member. If something in your bag does trigger the system, like an umbrella or a laptop or a metal drink container, the security system will alert the cast members, who will then direct you toward their more thorough bag check area, which thankfully is still a much shorter line to manage than it previously had been. To lessen your chance of having to get a thorough bag check, hold up any of those techie devices or metal-based items that could potentially trigger the system. That way, cast members will know why you are red flagged and be able to wave you on forward anyways. Okay, now this next one is something that is another one of those threads through everything else, and that's supply shortages. Supply shortages weren't just a problem in Disney World, they were a problem everywhere. Flashback to the great toilet paper crisis of 2020 and you'll remember exactly what I'm talking about. But it seems Disney World just can't seem to catch a break when it comes to being low on certain ingredients and merchandise even now. For the longest time, a handful of gift stores like Beverly Sunset Boutique and Disney's Hollywood Studios had to remain closed because there wasn't enough merchandise to keep the shelves stocked. Same went for the lightsaber building experience at Tatooine Traders and Hollywood Studios, and a handful of Disney Springs shops inside kiosks. There was also a short time where Galaxy's Edge ran out of carrying sleeves for lightsabers at Savi's workshop, as well as carrying cases for droids over at Droid Depot, so guests were sold these customizable items at a 10% discount and given clear plastic bags to carry them in instead. Last year, select Christmas items started arriving a few weeks after the holiday had already wrapped up, and prizes for the Epcot scavenger hunts were majorly behind. Olaf's Holiday Tradition Expedition scavenger hunt was supposed to have frozen decorative plates for scavenger hunt completionists, but instead, guests were given any odds and ends that the shops could find, like lanyards and pins and even a Mickey kitchen sink that's supposed to be for ice cream. Once the elusive frozen plates arrived, they were still being distributed as prizes during the Festival of the Arts when it was supposed to be Figment's time to shine. These stores are open now, and most of these items have been restocked since, but that doesn't mean Disney isn't still keeping an eye on the limited supply issues for souvenirs across all their stores. Lots of times you'll see signs in front of products that read, "Purchase is limited to 2 items per guest." This helps prevent only a select number of guests from getting the chance to purchase particular items, so it's not necessarily a foolproof system. But even more than merchandise, Disney's food supplies were running low and running out in several areas. We saw shortages on chicken tenders, on cream cheese, on seafood, on turkey, and on Ohana noodles, and that's just a few of the many ingredients Disney struggled to keep in their pantries. And that caused them to start creating Plan Bs and Cs and even Ds. Menus were condensed, entrees were created with substituted ingredients, food booths had to close up shop early, or not even open at all. Items were temporarily removed and replaced by something else, and hundreds of prices for items spiked up when demand for these meals and snacks started to rise again. But have food shortages let up somewhat since those initial 2020 reopenings? Well, kinda, but at the same time, not really. Just at the end of October this year, we learned from the CEO of Kraft Heinz, Miguel Patricio, during his interview with CNN that more price increases are on the horizon for their food products and condiments, many of which Disney uses in their parks too. And when a company that Disney directly works with has to make adjustments to help navigate these times, it becomes a domino effect. Higher prices at Kraft Heinz means the more money Disney has to spend on these items, and the more money Disney spends, the more money we spend, or the less of these items we'll have to choose from. And unfortunately, it's not just a Kraft Heinz issue. All the different food companies are playing catch-up, sorry, not a joking matter, but I couldn't help it, to make up for the losses from 2020 and brace themselves for the pending recession and wave of inflation. Okay, heavy stuff, but here's how you can brace yourself for these waves of changes too. Purchase items earlier in your trip rather than later on. Now, I'm not talking about mindlessly buying souvenirs left and right just because you're nervous about them running out on you. But if there's a certain souvenir that you know will stick around for a limited amount of time, it may be better for you to go ahead and buy it when you see it rather than try to track it down later. Also, see if you can find the item you're wanting on the Shop Disney website before you buy it too, because if you see it available on shopdisney.com, not only does that most likely mean this merchandise probably isn't flying off the shelves at the moment, but it also means you can potentially purchase it for cheaper online when Shop Disney is having one of their frequent sales. You can also save more than you think you'll need. It's important to not just budget for a trip, but over budget, just to make sure that if food prices increase, which they probably will, you're not going to be taken off guard. You also want to have those backup plans ready to go. If a certain food item you were desperately wanting to try is not on the menu, then make sure you have something else in mind that'll help fill the hole the missing snack left behind. We've got a whole bunch of suggestions for you on our Best Eats video, but you can also get a more detailed look at all the different restaurant offerings on Disney World property, and by all, I mean all, in our DFB Guide to Walt Disney World Dining. You can pre-order your 2023 copy today, and if you do that, you'll get the 2022 copy for free as an instant download, so 2 guides for the price of 1, and you start planning today. Now, it wasn't just security screenings that started to go touchless post-2020 closures. Lots of aspects of how you navigate Disney as a whole now are very touchless. It's a virtually driven system. So let's talk about touchless interactions and how that rolled into Disney and still exists 2.5 years later. When the parks first reopened, mobile ordering from quick service wasn't just recommended, it was required. So instead of standing in a physical line to order food, you could scan a QR code in front of the restaurant and pull up everything you needed to order your meal, just like you would for any other food delivery service. When your order was ready, the app would notify you. You'd then show the notification to a cast member at the front of the restaurant, and they'd let you go on in to pick up your meal, because you weren't really allowed to enter a quick service location until your meal was ready. Nowadays, the option to stand in a physical line to order your quick service food has returned, but Disney still recommends using the mobile order option instead to help you save time and avoid standing in a ginormous line. Mobile ordering does allow you to choose a return window that works best for you and your group, and that doesn't mean every return window will be available when you go to select one. Peak lunch and dinner times are going to book up quickly, but you still have more control over when you can return to get your food. Now, Disney also requested that guests use mobile check-in for a while when you arrived at your Disney World hotel. Mobile check-in makes it to where you can skip the front desk procedures at your Disney hotel and just go to your room as soon as you get to the hotel. All of this can be done via your My Disney Experience app, just like mobile ordering, and you can even make your room requests and connect your Magic Band all through the app. But let's say you needed to talk to a cast member about questions or concerns regarding your room or other aspects of your Disney trip. Front desks and guest service locations did stay open, but with the new virtual chat features on the My Disney Experience app, you could still avoid the in-person chat and go straight to the Chat with Us section on the app to direct message a cast member instead. But that's not the only way My Disney Experience has become absolutely vital to your trip. Magic Mobile gave and still gives you the ability to access important trip details like your park tickets, your room keys, and your restaurant reservations all in one convenient and free location. You can also open your room door with just your phone. You don't have to have a Magic Band anymore. Not to mention, Disney's flagship gift stores push the importance of mobile checkout as well, where you can scan the barcode of an item you are wanting to buy with your phone's camera and purchase it right then and there as if you were shopping for it online. No standing in line for the registers. Now, because there was such a huge drive for touchless features around the Disney parks post-2020 closures, that same drive was used to create many parts of Disney's newest cruise ship, the Disney Wish. Doors open when you wave your hand, menus can be accessed via QR codes, touchless buttons have been installed in each of the elevators, which feels useless since everyone touches them anyways. But even as the urgency for touchless features continues to dwindle, these features are still super useful and time-saving as you plan for your Disney trips today. If you plan on using your My Disney Experience app a lot while you plan your Disney World vacation and while you're on vacation, make sure to set up your My Disney Experience profile as soon as possible. That way you can have all your personal and payment info saved in the app and ready to use whenever you need it. Also keep in mind that you don't have to use mobile services as often as you used to during 2020. In fact, you don't really have to use them at all if you don't want to. Just a tool in place to help make planning and navigating the parks easier. But the classic methods of checking into hotels, ordering food, and buying merchandise are still very much alive and well. Now, let's talk quickly about things that are still closed. Although so many shows and restaurants have returned to the parks since 2020, the fates of several experiences are still shaky in lieu of potentially not having enough cast members to staff each of these places. In Magic Kingdom, Enchanted Tales with Belle and Ariel's Grotto remain closed with no mention of a return date. In Hollywood Studios, Voyage of the Little Mermaid stage show remains dark. In Epcot, Restaurant Marrakesh in the Morocco Pavilion has an ever-lingering fate. Another Japan Pavilion favorite, the Pick a Pearl experience inside the Mitsukoshi department store, has remained closed, although they keep filling the tanks with water, which I don't really understand why. Not to mention the extra offerings that usually happen during Epcot's Food and Wine Festival, like those dining seminars, or deminars as we like to call them, cooking classes, and even more opportunities to taste around the world via premium party experiences, have not come back since 2019. Sometimes closures are a bit more sporadic. When Disney doesn't have enough staffing for the day, certain snack kiosks, side gift shops, or outdoor kitchens for the Epcot festivals could shutter their doors for the day simply because the park's operating with a tight cast and crew. But don't let these closures discourage you. As I mentioned before, and I'll probably mention several more times, there are still so many aspects of Disney World returning to their former glory, thanks to more and more cast members getting hired and rehired to help the parks thrive. In fact, on November 23rd, we got to welcome back an ultra fancy Epcot restaurant we've been missing for a long time, Takumi Tei in the Japan Pavilion. And on October 18th, another fancy Epcot restaurant, Monsieur Paul, was also able to reopen in the France Pavilion. So don't forget to thank those cast members whenever you get the chance to. You can even drop cast compliments directly through My Disney Experience app by tapping on those 3 vertical lines on the bottom of the screen and scrolling down until you see a section that says Cast Compliment. Please, please use it. Use it all the time because those cast members are doing an incredible job. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about resort hopping, which used to be a very, very common activity. And then when the pandemic hit, it just shut down, right? Here's the thing. Disney World's always encouraged hopping between resorts on your break days away from the parks, but they wanted you to have a reason to do so, i.e. they wanted you to have at least a dining reservation at the resort you were wanting to visit. But the rules for this before 2020 were more lax. When the pandemic hit, however, the hotels were slowly but surely starting to reopen, and Disney really cracked down on those rules. Not only that, they completely discouraged guests from resort hopping at all unless they had a dining reservation or an actual hotel reservation there, which would be checked at the front gate when you were driving in. Today, Disney's okay with you visiting other resorts, but you're gonna have to get to them via Disney's complimentary transportation services if you don't have a dining reservation already lined up. So through the Disney buses, the boats, the Skyliner, or the monorail. Otherwise, you still won't be allowed to drive yourself over to another resort and park for a bit while you browse around unless you have a dining reservation. And prefix menus have become much more of a thing. Prefix menus, or set menus at a set price, have always been a thing in Disney World, but they started popping up in more dining locations post-closures. Now, remember how I said there were a couple of threads that were going to be running through this whole video? The staff shortages, the food shortages, and of course those health and safety concerns. All of those come together as a perfect storm to contribute to the rise of the prefix menu. We saw them appear in new restaurants like Space 220 and Epcot, and in pre-existing ones like Be Our Guest Restaurant in Magic Kingdom and California Grill at the Contemporary Resort. Not only did prefix menus demand fewer chefs in the kitchen, which contributed to the health and safety concerns, but they also acted as a solution for themed restaurants that were still being impacted by those food shortages. Limited menus, higher prefix prices equals a win-win for Disney. Now, prefix menus don't have to be a bad thing. If you're someone who usually orders full meals at restaurants, complete with an appetizer, entree, and dessert, then this set price formula could actually work much like the old Disney dining plan did. No, more on that later, I promise. Now, you already know how much more you're going to pay for your meal, so you have the freedom to select whatever you want from each category. Easy. But if you tend to only eat just an entree or want to split an appetizer and some drinks with your group, then a prefix dining experience that's required will force you to pay more for food than you actually want. Prefix menus aren't going to go away anytime soon, which is why you'll always want to look at the Disney World menus online to figure out which restaurants have those set menu prices versus which ones have an a la carte situation. That way, you won't run into any monetary surprises that could throw off your dining budget. Now, a quick note for Space 220, although that is a prefix set price meal, you can dine in the lounge. And even though the menu is a little bit different, you can purchase a la carte. The same goes for California Grill at the Contemporary as well. And character dining isn't quite back to normal yet, though we're getting there. Character dining definitely took a hit there during 2020 and through 2021 and this year as well. First, character dining was slowly reintroduced to a handful of restaurants like Chef Mickey's at Contemporary Resort, Topolino's Terrace and Riviera, and a modified format. Characters could wave at you in passing and you could take snapshots of them on your phone from afar, but other than that, not a whole lot of meeting and greeting. There were no hugs, there were no autographs. Then there were more character dining opportunities reintroduced to the restaurants over the next couple of years. And during these reintroductions, we saw character meet and greets go back to their normal, huggable selves back in April 2022. But that doesn't mean there aren't character dining experiences out there that we're still waiting to see return to normal. Cinderella's Royal Table and Be Our Guest Restaurant in Magic Kingdom, for example, are still happening with modified character meet and greets. So in the case of Cinderella's Royal Table, don't expect a lot of different princesses to swing by your table to say hello. Instead, you're going to be able to take a quick PhotoPass picture with Cindy before your meal begins, but that's pretty much it. Same thing goes with Beast. Instead of mingling with guests at Be Our Guest Restaurant, you may be able to get a PhotoPass picture with him during dinner, though that's not always guaranteed and really wasn't a guarantee even before the pandemic. In Disney's Grand Floridian Resort and Spa, 1900 Park Fair character dining and the Garden View Tea Room are still temporarily unavailable and have no return date in sight. And Trattoria Al Forno at Disney's Boardwalk Inn still hasn't gotten back their characters, meaning no shooting the breeze with Rapunzel and Eugene Flynn Rider, or Ariel and Prince Eric. In the meantime, if you're looking for a character dining experience to hit up, there are fortunately plenty to choose from. A few of our personal favorites that are back to normal include Storybook Dining at Artist Point with Snow White at Disney's Wilderness Lodge, Akershus Royal Banquet Hall with a rotating assortment of princesses like Belle, Jasmine, and Aurora at the Norway Pavilion in Epcot, and Best Friends Breakfast at Ohana with Lilo, Stitch, and Hawaiian-themed Mickey and Pluto over at Disney's Polynesian Village Resort. Next, we're going to move into things that weren't caused by the pandemic, but were still sort of pushed into motion post-park closures, and Disney might sort of try to lump them in with those things that were caused by the pandemic, when really they maybe already wanted to do this stuff. Several of these concepts were probably already in Disney's back pocket, and the closures were used as a catalyst. The first one up, the removal of FastPass. Yep, as easy as it is to blame the historic 2020 closures for the reason we don't have FastPasses today, the premium lightning lanes that replaced them were a concept probably before the pandemic was on the horizon. We just didn't realize it. The Disney Genie planning tool, attached to the My Disney Experience app, was originally announced during the 2019 D23 Expo. And at first, guests were kind of like, okay, neat, customized itineraries sound pretty cool. But the Disney Genie concept went silent for a good long while. When the parks reopened after the historic closures, FastPasses didn't return along with them. But then again, many things didn't reopen right away, so guests still kind of hoped this complimentary line bypassing system would come back in eventually. And remember, the reason we understood FastPasses didn't come back is because of the 6-foot distancing rule, and it wouldn't make sense to have people so close to each other in a FastPass line and a standby line. But soon Disney Genie arose, and technically it did what it originally said it was going to do. It gave us a free tool to help build customized itineraries, and it gave us tip boards with forecasted ride wait times, and a navigable dining section that shows when the next available quick service pickup window is, or which table service restaurants still have walk-up availability. But Disney Genie also introduced 2 premium features, Disney Genie Plus and those individual lightning lanes. Both of these features take the original FastPass concept and slap a price tag on them. Today, you can purchase Disney Genie Plus at a surge price ranging between $15 and $22 per person per day, which will give you the ability to make Lightning Lane reservations for over 40 rides and attractions. Individual Lightning Lanes, on the other hand, are a surge price per person per ride and give you 1 ride through on each park's most popular ride. With a little studying up, you can still maximize your Genie Plus purchases and stretch your dollar where you can, especially if you purchase Genie Plus at midnight when they release and then start making Lightning Lane reservations immediately when you can, usually around 7 a.m. But it doesn't make guests any less put off by the fact that this used to be free and now it's not. All right, get ready for these next 3 points because they are a mystery still waiting to be solved. First is the case of the missing dining plan. Yep, the Disney dining plan was a pre-purchased dining package that you could add to your Disney vacation. This way you could pretty much prepay for all your meals ahead of time to avoid stressing over paying for each meal during your vacation. Back in the summer of 2021, Disney broke its silence about the DDP and told guests that yes, the plan would be returning eventually. And then crickets, nothing, nada, not a word after that, and we're almost into the 2023 season now. So could 2023 be the year we see the Disney dining plan return? Well, maybe. After all, many of the restaurants have reopened, new ones have been added, and as we continue moving through a potential recession, it would technically make sense for Disney to offer up this plan again as more of an incentive to return, but that's all speculation. Whatever happens, it's best to be familiar with the way the DDP worked before so you know what to expect when it does return. Luckily, we've got a Disney Dining Plan video already on your YouTube channel. If you want to take a look at the nitty-gritty details yourself, head over and check out that video next. Also, Tables in Wonderland was a membership offered to annual pass holders, Disney Vacation Club owners, and Florida residents to help save 20% on food and beverages, including alcohol, at over 100 restaurants and lounges in Disney World's parks and hotels. But post-closures, Disney ceased all Tables in Wonderland sales and hasn't said a word about them since. Those who had already purchased Tables memberships before the pandemic were able to use these savings until September 2021, but after that, Disney didn't offer up any renewals, so the Tables in Wonderland add-on is just sort of gone. And the fate of that membership is pretty shaky. Next mystery is that annual pass mystery. I mentioned annual passes earlier on, but here's what's going on with these tricky little tickets on the front lines. For a good long while, annual passes were just not an option. And sure, that was pretty understandable when the parks were just starting to open up again. Not many people were jumping at the idea of getting annual passes for half-open parks anyways. In September of 2021, annual passes came back for a while under a new 4-part tier system, which incorporated the Park Pass reservation rules. The first 3 tiers were for Florida residents only, with the Pixie Dust Pass being the cheapest option with the most amount of block-out dates and least amount of Park Pass reservations you could hold at a time. The most expensive of the tiers, the Incredipass, was available for both Florida residents and out-of-towners, which had no block-out dates and gave pass holders the ability to hold up to 5 Park Pass reservations at once. It also cost $1,299 per pass holder. But only a couple of months later, Disney stopped selling 3 of the 4 annual pass tiers, leaving only the Pixie Dust Pass as an available option. Nothing for out-of-staters, and it's been that way ever since. Again, the controversy behind the annual passes is thick and complicated. I'll try to boil it down to a sentence or two, though. Disney doesn't actually like selling annual passes, because if they sell too many annual passes, then those are the folks taking up the majority of the Park Pass reservations in the parks. And since annual pass holders are frequent flyers, they're not necessarily out in the park spending tons of money like the folks who only visit the parks every now and then and want to pay top dollar for a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So, according to Disney, annual pass holders are not necessarily the most financially favorable fans. Now, that doesn't mean Disney's not going to bring back annual passes ever. In fact, Disney Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer Christine McCarthy stated in the most recent quarterly earnings report that the company was currently reimagining their annual pass business model, which they referred to as offering flexibility for Disney, which we take to mean Disney can rely on annual pass holders coming in and spending money even when other people aren't during a potential recession. So again, we could see annual passes go on sale in 2023, but if they do go on sale, they'll definitely look different than the tiers we're used to. Now, while some Disney World extras disappeared, some other Disney World extras kind of morphed into something new. Let's talk next about extra magic hours. Once upon a time, all Disney World Resort guests had access to extra magic hours. These extra magic hours would either get you into the parks an hour before they opened, or they'd let you linger an hour or two longer after the parks closed. But at the risk of sounding like a broken record here, these benefits were stripped from guests who were coming to the parks post-closures. In October 2021, a new type of extra magic hour was introduced, which looked very similar to the old extra hours, except it was split into 2 categories with different rules. Category 1, early theme park entry. Now, the pros of early theme park entry: no longer were Disney Resort guests limited to having to wait for specific days to enter certain parks early. Now, early theme park entry can be used for any park on any day. The con? The early entry has been severely cut down. Now, instead of an hour of extra time in the parks, you get 30 minutes to hit up as many rides as you can before the rest of the crowd starts shuffling in. Category 2, extended evening hours. Much like before, resort guests can only stay in the parks an hour or two after the parks close to the rest of the public on specific days in specific parks. But unlike before, this benefit is only available for guests staying in a deluxe Disney World resort. That means the most expensive ones. If you are planning on staying in a deluxe resort during your next visit, this definitely works in your favor. Essentially, it'll feel like you got the parks all to yourself for a couple more hours, meaning walk-on rides and no shoulder-to-shoulder crowds. But again, you're paying a whole lot extra for this benefit that used to be available to anybody staying at any Disney-owned hotel. Before you book a room in a deluxe resort, check out Disney World's online calendar to get an overview of the park hours for the week. That way you'll know exactly when extended evening hours will be available during your visit, because it's really only a couple nights a week. And then you can plan your trip around a time when you'll be able to use those extended hours as often as possible. Because if you have that benefit, you might as well use it, and use it a lot. And now for an addition that actually made our time in Disney World easier. Well, some of us anyway. Virtual healthcare. The Advent Health Disney World partnership didn't suddenly happen upon the 2020 health crisis. Actually, even in 2019, Advent Health hosted an outdoor kitchen at Epcot's International Flower and Garden Festival. But this healthcare service did work alongside Disney World during those trying times when Disney was implementing new health and safety measures to protect guests and cast members. In 2020 and 2021, Advent Health provided temperature checks throughout the Disney World Resort to make sure guests with temperatures higher than 100.4 degrees were not entering into the parks and Disney Springs shopping district. But in May of 2021, Advent Health and Disney World took their relationship to the next level, and Advent Health became the official healthcare provider at Walt Disney World. Because of this partnership, all Disney World guests now have access to virtual care options directly through the My Disney Experience app. Meaning, if you have a non-urgent medical matter that you want to talk to a doctor or nurse practitioner about without having to leave your Disney World hotel room, you can scroll down on your My Disney Experience app to the section that reads Healthcare Services. From there, you'll be given a list of several different healthcare options, including video visits, prescription delivery, medical equipment rental and delivery, and CentraCare Urgent Care, aka an option for guests who do want to speak to a doctor in person at an urgent care clinic. You can even arrange for complimentary transportation to the CentraCare Urgent Care Clinic from your Disney World resort if need be. Just keep in mind that Advent Health and Disney World both want you to still report emergency medical situations to 911 immediately. These virtual healthcare options are more for guests who are feeling under the weather, but their systems can be managed with a little extra guidance. Okay, back to the stuff we're still missing dearly to this very day. Disney's Magical Express. Gone, but not forgotten. Now, Disney's Magical Express used to be the complimentary bus service that'd pick you up from the Orlando airport and take you over to your Disney World hotel, then bring you back again when your trip was over. And though it's easy to point fingers at the pandemic closures and blame them for being the cause of Disney's Magical Express ending its run at the beginning of 2022, Disney didn't end their airport shuttle services, period. They just found a way to charge for them. Now, guests can book a seat on either the Mears Connect or Sunshine Flyer shuttle services. Both of these cost around $32 per adult for a round trip, though you do have the option to pay more for your group to have the Express service, which will take you straight to your hotel with no additional stops, and put you back about $250 for up to 4 passengers, and an extra $55 for each additional passenger. You can make your reservations for either shuttle after you book your flight into Orlando Airport, but if you'd rather not take the bus route, you can always turn to rideshare services instead, like Uber or Lyft, or you can get a taxi, or you can do a car rental. Whatever the case may be, unless you know someone who lives in the Orlando area who is willing to brave I-4 to come get you, you're going to have to pay in order to get out of the airport and to your hotel. And we've also got no more free magic bands. Gone are the days when Disney World resort guests had the option to receive free standard magic bands before the start of their trips. Ever since the resorts reopened, the free magic bands did not return. Instead, resort guests can still get certain magic band styles at a discounted rate sent to their home before vacation, but otherwise, magic bands are still going to cost you some sort of additional money before your trip. Remember, My Disney Experience's Magic Mobile option does lots of the same things that the regular magic bands do, aside from looking all cool and stylish. So unless you want a cool design to wear around the parks, or you want additional features that come with the Magic Band Plus models, then you can avoid all that extra cost per person and stick with the completely free Magic Mobile option instead. Now, here's an interesting addition to this list, because this next point is actually more of a mixture of both of the categories in this video. The things that the pandemic actually did force to happen, and the things that Disney's sort of blaming the pandemic for. Now, Disney World wanted to do these big changes, and the pandemic sort of pushed them into happening in a different way. When things finally started to reopen again around Disney World property, resort openings or hotel openings didn't happen all at once. They happened little by little up until March of 2022. So why did some resorts open lots later than others? A few reasons. Staff shortages, limited capacity, the need to cut back on resort hopping, but some stayed dark because Disney was in the midst of giving them an updated look, and they used the pandemic closures to really expedite this. We saw this happen across several of the deluxe resorts. Wilderness Lodge fully reopened on June 6th, 2021 with renovated non-DVC guest rooms that featured lighter color schemes, hardwood floors, and subtle additional Disney characters in the decor like Chip and Dale, Bambi, maybe even the Country Bears depending on what room you're in. And Disney's Polynesian Village Resort opened on July 19th, 2021 with brand new Moana themed rooms, meaning lots of bright floral accents and design work reminiscent of Maui's tattoo art. Disney's Contemporary Resort fully reopened on July 10th, 2020, but became unrecognizable for a while as it underwent several major changes, like updating all the tower rooms to have a modernized Incredibles theme, completely replacing the Wave of American Flavors restaurant with Steakhouse 71, and changing the California Grill menu to have a brand new Prefix menu just in time for the 50th anniversary celebration kickoff. Granted, these updates probably would have happened whether the pandemic closures occurred or not, but since the closures were already happening, Disney was able to use this time to make the changes they wanted to without having to ask guests to pardon their pixie dust. Just because all the hotels are open now doesn't mean the renovations have come to a halt, though. There are several resort changes currently in the works, including a complete Boardwalk Inn makeover with new restaurants, a freshened lobby area, redesigned rooms, and an added coffee shop. We actually already got to try one of the new restaurants this year, the Boardwalk Deli, and we're excited to try Gwendolyn Rogers' Cake Bake Shop in 2023. We even got more Polynesian Village construction going on with the addition of the new Disney Vacation Club building set to open in late 2024, which meant the closure of the Spirit of Aloha dinner show. And Disney's Grand Floridian Resort and Spa is currently working on remodeling its Narcoossee's signature dining experience with a new dining room and fresh selection of entrees. Grand Floridian has seen its fair share of updates since reopening in summer 2020, with additions like 200 new Disney Vacation Club rooms over in the Big Pine Key building, a refreshed look to its AAA-rated Victoria and Albert's fine dining experience, and the additional Mary Poppins Returns theming to its already established Citrico's restaurant. Grand Floridian is also currently remodeling all of its rooms to the Mary Poppins theme, so stay tuned for that. It's beautiful. I love it. Okay, now let me send you off with one final thought. Disney World wasn't immune to the impacts of COVID-19 that swept across the globe, and that meant Disney had to make some wild changes that we never thought we'd see pop up in the parks. Though some of those changes did not stick around, like masking and plexiglass on rides and having your temperature taken each time you entered the parks, several changes did stick around, and they've completely changed the way we plan our vacations to the most magical place on Earth. Although some of these new rules, restrictions, and added features may take a little more planning to figure out how to navigate without any hiccups, it's still possible to pull off an epic Disney World trip for you and your family, and that's why you're here. Stick with us, the DFB crew. We will show you all the ins and outs as we navigate this new Disney normal together. Thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks for watching. As always, this is AJ for Disney Food Blog, and we'll see you real soon.